One thing that I've always loved about Yu-Gi-Oh! And any card game really is that everyone likes different formats. For me personally, I enjoy the sort of wide variety formats where every deck can be successful with the right tech options and where you see tons of strategies topping at regionals and YCSs and even WCQs. I like those formats a lot, but I know that many players actually like the exact opposite. A lot of competitive players, unlike myself, really do like the formats that aren't necessarily tier 0, but that just have 3 or 4 main decks topping, and the less decks that you have actually expecting to play against at a tournament means the more main deck tech that you can play. For example, when Zodiacs were a huge deck and pretty much every single round at a tournament you'd play against some form of Zoo, you could use cards like My Body as a shield in your main deck because you knew that would always be good against Zodiac Trident. If Zoo was released in a format where there's another extremely popular deck, one that didn't destroy cards, then maybe My Body as a shield wouldn't actually be that good of a tech option, but because Zoo was so popular, you could play cards like that. So in today's video, I'm not going to say that there's an objectively best Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Actually, I want to talk about my favorite format, as well as show some clips from your favorite and most loved Yu-Gi tubers that you guys watch and have them answer the same question as well. Now, when I usually get asked this question, I always answer the same thing, and that's 2014 hat format, but I think I'm going to change my answer because when I really think of hat format, I mean, I loved the variety, and I loved that was like the first competitive format that I played, but I think I'm looking at it with too much nostalgia because that was the first competitive season of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I played throughout the entire year. It was also where I got my first regional top 8, and I did the most traveling that I've ever done up until that point. So I think when I think back to 2014 and how fun the format was, I'm more so remembering how much fun I had sort of hanging out with my friends and going to events with them, not so much the actual competitiveness or the variety of that format in particular. So when I think of a format that's actually truly sort of diverse and there's tons of different unique strategies topping events, I think of late 2016, right after the World Championship. There was a UDS, there was multiple regional qualifiers that I went to, and that was the format where Pot of Desires had just been released. And for those of you that didn't play when Pot of Desires was released, you were really missing out because there was like a 6-month period where no one had Ash Blossom because it wasn't released yet, but you did have Pot of Desires, so the card almost always resolved. There was almost no counter to it except for spell negation, and there isn't a lot of that floating around, and it felt really good to activate a Pot of Desires and not have to ask your opponent for a response just in case they had Ash Blossom, because nothing feels worse than banishing the top 10 cards of your deck and then not even drawing 2 cards. But that format was super exciting. You had Blue Eyes, you had Metal Foes, you had ABCs, all sorts of strategies that were topping events, and it was really exciting. And the deck that I was playing at the time was Zombie Phantom Knights, which I love Phantom Knights, I love zombies, it was the perfect mashup for me. There were just tons of unique strategies floating around. The things that Blue Eyes were doing were very different from the things that Metal Foes were doing and the ABCs were doing, and that my deck was doing, versus 2014, where many decks were using the exact same extra deck. So I think that I have fond memories of the actual format of 2016, or late 2016, I should specify, and overall, that is probably my favorite format that I've ever played in. Anyway, though, now that I've talked about my favorite format and my second favorite format, 2014, enjoy the rest of the clips in this video where you hear some of your favorite Yu-Gi tubers talking about their own favorite formats.
What's good, YouTube? And welcome to Dzeeff's channel. I actually want to talk today about one of my favorite formats to have ever played in, and that's the 2009 WCQ format, one of the first ever healthy diversities in the game. Previously, we had, ramping up to this, Troop Dupe, Monarch Perfect, Circle, Dad, Return, Gladiator Beast, Teledad, really dominant decks. But here in the top 4 of this WCQ, you see Lightsworn, Blackwing, Synchro Cat, and Gladiator Beast. 4 different kind of decks, and you actually see Konami commentator Michael Kohanem top 4 this WCQ that I play tested with the day before. I personally got smashed during this WCQ. I didn't do so hot, but I really and truly enjoyed playing during this format, and I think it's one of the first formats where if you're playing meta, you have a lot of different choices to go with that feel really powerful. Previously, Gladiator Beast was like one of the decks, and it gets curved to being a deck just properly, and you don't see that too often these days. Once in a while you see it, but not as much as you might have used to, and it kind of sets a trend for that being a thing. So definitely one of my favorites to have taken part in. What's yours? Comment section.
Why Dzeeff subscribers don't understand 2014 format. The reason why 2014 pretty much all of it represents some of the best Yu-Gi-Oh that I've ever played, is because of the fact of how diverse it was and how generic the good cards of that format were. You had Curry Bandit, you had Soul Charge, you had all kinds of different archetypes as well, like the artifacts, trap tricks, hands. So many different things in 2014 were just amazing. They were splashable. You could play them and mix them together. And of course, near the end, we had Burning Abyss, the advent of the greatest deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't say that ironically or as a joke. I genuinely believe that deck is the greatest thing to have ever graced this game because of how versatile and malleable it is, and just how much it's impacted the meta, and how it continues to be amazing and just fun. Format after format after format, it keeps developing and growing into something new and something unique. And that's why, listen, other than Duelist Alliance, even before that, if you didn't play back then, you missed out. Because if you enjoy playing any deck you like, then let me tell you, 2014 was the year to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because everything was topping that format, from Bujins to Worms to Sylvans to Dragons to Infernity. Everything you could think of probably topped at some point in 2014. That was the best year of Yu-Gi-Oh! For me, and it will always be where I would look back very fondly. And I'd highly recommend you maybe try out some older formats and duels online and give 2014 a shot. And that's what I consider to be my favorite year of Yu-Gi-Oh! Although there was multiple formats.
My favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Format probably has to be the Duelist Alliance format. Now, this does carry a little bit into later sets at the time as well, but I can't really remember the last time the Yu-Gi-Oh! Player base was so reinvigorated and so impassioned when it came to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there wasn't really a set that unleashed so many powerful archetypes into the game at once, and you could pick up any of these decks, and it created this format that was this triangle format where between Shaddoll, Burning Abyss, and Clifford, whichever deck you chose, you immediately had a very strong matchup against one deck, you had a very poor matchup against another, and then you had to learn the mirror match. And those were like the three pillars of that format. But in addition to that, you also had Satellar Knight, which was a very strong Tier 2 contender as well. You had Yang Zing, which was a strong Tier 2 contender. And you had a lot of people experimenting with other decks because these decks weren't like vastly overpowered and outclassing other things. So people were able to play and incorporate other strategies into this format as well. It was kind of the last time there was so much interactivity and a lot of back and forth in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I really miss that. I miss the Duelist Alliance age, and I think a lot of people do as well. And I really wish we could go back to that golden era of Yu-Gi-Oh!
My favorite formats are always ones that are super interactive between the two players. Stuff that has the first player build up a board and then the second player try to break it. And it doesn't really feel insurmountable. It feels like a challenge, but it doesn't feel like, oh, I just vomited out half my deck. Have fun trying to beat this. Stuff like Metal Foes format, Zoo Metal Foes, and parts of Zoo before the meta started getting really solved and doing the Fusion Sub Norden combos. Things that where you didn't really need to have like 3 board wipes in order to beat. Spyral also fits that criteria, and I think Spyral is probably my favorite. Specifically the format where drones and quick fix were set to 1, so you could no longer do the shenanigans with triple firewall, tri-gate, machine dupe garbage. That one YCS, everyone was basically, if you won the coin toss and you were playing that deck, you were going to win. It was after they started introducing Spyral Tough into decks, and a lot of diversity started coming through with focusing on going second and trying to break opponents' boards. I know Joshua Schmidt was playing a Dark Spyral build with Dark Grepher and Armageddon Knight. I don't know how good that deck was because I didn't play it, but it started getting really diverse with builds between each other. People started using tech choices like Bottomless Trap Hole if they were forced to go first, or Ghost Trick Jack Frost so they can stop the Spyral Sleeper OTK and flip it face down. That format was a lot of fun. The only downside for it for me was Trick Stars because everyone at my fucking local played it, and I hate Trick Stars. Fuck that deck.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy Sam from Team ZamaX1 here. You guys probably don't know who I am. Thank you so much, Doug, for having me guest upload or guest feature on this channel. And he asked me to talk to you guys about what is my favorite format of all time and why. To be honest, you know what? Your boy can play any format. FTKs, whatever, U-Link, your boy can play it all. But my favorite has to be Dino Rabbit format. That was probably my favorite format. And the reason why I like Down Rabbit format is because, believe it or not, guys, back in the day, Legia and Dolga were really powerful cards. You know, really powerful monsters, and at the same time were very expensive. Tour Guide was like $200 a piece. Rescue Rabbit was like $80 a piece. The whole deck was just very expensive, but the whole meta was kind of diverse. There was, you know, a lot of Mermails, there was a lot of Down Rabbits, there was a lot of Six Samurais, there was a lot of Insectors. Okay, so those were the 4 decks that was, you know, just, you know, around during that time. And me and myself, I love to play Six Samurais in that format. And Six Samurais during that format, was already nerfed, okay? So Gateway was already at 1, Shin Smokeson was at 1, Reinforcement of the Army was at 1, but one of the most interesting things about any deck during that meta game was that Fiendish Chain was a card. And me personally, I love playing control decks, so basically what I try to do with my Six Samurais back in the day is that I'll usually make Shin, set 5 back row, pass. That's how I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day. 2 Fiendish Chains in my opening hand, I immediately just won the duel. So basically, I was just trying to sit on my Shin, set 5 back rolls consisting of Double-Edged Sword, Magatama, and also cards like Fiendish Chain to stun my opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And then next turn, I just proceed to just try to OTK my opponent, depending on the amount of Samurai monsters that I have in my hand. So there was a lot of interaction in Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, you just opponent summons Legia, set a couple back row, pass. You draw your turn. Okay, your opponent only has 1 negate. So you set 5 back row, you summon Shin, try to beat out that 1 negate, and then you can just still play Yu-Gi-Oh! Unlike in today's metagame, where if your opponent has 4 or 5 negates, you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! You know what I mean? But back in the day, you know, it was very simple. Summon Shin, set 5, pass. Your opponent's turn, activate a small card. Was Shin negate? I don't know, maybe. You know, it all depends, you know what I mean? So I really believe that that format for me really stood out, and I just love playing my Six Samurais back in the day, and that's how this channel basically started, during that format. Yeah, that's my favorite format, and yeah, that's why. Thanks, Doug, for featuring me.
My favorite format in Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all time has to be Tier 0 Nekroz format. And I know a lot of times when people talk about their favorite format, it's normally not one that resides in Tier 0 status, which is just one deck is the most optimal to play. And maybe you can get away with playing a rogue deck, but for the most part, you're going to be seeing 90% of the time mirror matches. I love the fact that these mirror matches really exemplify the true knowledge of a competitive player at a high level player. It is normally these Tier 0 formats where you'll see these top level players that you already know and love, like Jeff Jones, Billy Brake. They all start to do well in these formats in particular because their knowledge of the game is so much more vast. It's larger than any of the other average players. So they're able to actually apply all this knowledge into a format correctly by deck building and also just playing in general. I love Nekroz format in particular though because I thought all the ins and outs of it was really interesting. Like knowing the optimal time to use your Jin lock, you had access to it like all the time, but also your opponent had access to a lot of outs in the form that Reinforcement of the Army was at 3. I loved all the searching in this format, and really it was at its peak because you're able to search not only outs, but you're able to have these back and forth matches. Also understanding little things like cleaning your own board with Nekroz of, Valkyris, to make sure your opponent can't activate their Nekroz of Trishula. Just all these little ins and outs that you had to understand, that you had to micromanage to really be a top-level player in this format. Really, I liked watching the mirror matches in this format too because they were so back and forth, and there's also, it's just so open-ended what you could do with these turns, and really everybody could have their own opinion what the most optimal play was. But I love this format a lot. I love the deck, Nekroz, a lot. I really would like to see this deck back at full power, but I don't think that's a possibility. But when it comes to competitive play, I don't think there's a peak that is higher than that of Tier 0 Nekroz. Maybe Tier 0 Zodiac, but I'm still sticking with Tier 0 Nekroz.
And that's about it for today's video. Huge shout out to every single person that appeared in this video. You guys are the best friends that a YouTuber could have. Links to every single channel in today's video will be in the description. I love all these guys. Feel free to check them out. Make sure you go subscribe and check out their own content. This was a huge project that I've been working on for the past week, and I'm so excited to finally show it to you guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. Anyway, though, that's all for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.